Rich bully mocks the wrong simple woman. His laughter cuts through the restaurant like a knife. Her eyes meet his. Mock me again. Her voice soft, but deadly. He has no idea what's coming. The Sterling Room was Manhattan's temple of prestige. Crystal chandeliers cast warm glow over tables where deals were brokered and reputations forged. To enter was to announce one's arrival in New York's social pantheon. Margaret Walker pushed through the heavy glass doors, drawing curious glances. Her simple black dress hung loose on her slender frame after a grueling 20-hour flight from Singapore. Wrinkles told stories of airport terminals and cramped economy seats. Her chestnut hair had escaped its hasty ponytail. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. She hadn't stopped at her hotel, coming straight from JFK. "I believe Antonio is expecting me," she said quietly to the host. At the center table sat Richard Harrington, hedge fund manager whose reputation preceded him. His tailored suit fit like armor, his Swiss watch catching light with each gesture. Richard measured his worth by how effectively he could diminish others. His specialty was casual cruelty delivered with just enough wit that bystanders felt permitted to laugh along. That Richard's attention shifted as Margaret was led to her table. His predatory gaze registered her rumpled appearance. Well, he murmured loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Looks like someone got lost on the way to the diner down the street." His companion snickered. Margaret met his gaze directly, her exhausted eyes suddenly sharp. That a waiter approached. "Perhaps Madam would prefer our prefix option," he suggested, avoiding mention of the expensive tasting menu. "The full tasting menu, please," Margaret replied. "And sparkling water. I'll decide on wine after speaking with Antonio." Richard's laugh cut through the conversation. "Better check your credit limit first, honey. That menu costs more than your entire outfit." Margaret took a slow sip of water. "I'm sure I'll manage. Let me guess. Big night out. Once-in-a-lifetime splurge." Each question was a dart designed to pierce dignity. "Just hungry," Margaret replied. The brevity irritated Richard more than any defense might have. "There's a perfectly decent diner 10 blocks south," Richard continued. "Much more your ambience." His companion snickered. "Thank you for the recommendation. Perhaps another time." Richard stood, sensing opportunity. He strolled toward Margaret's table, wine glass in hand. "I'm just trying to save you from embarrassment. This place has standards. Doesn't it feel aspirational for someone like you?" "Someone like me," Margaret echoed, looking directly into his eyes. Something flickered behind her exhausted gaze that gave Richard pause. "You're clearly not from around here. The Sterling Room has a certain clientele, a certain quality we've come to expect." "And you're the arbiter of quality?" Margaret asked, her voice composed but with new edge. "I don't need to be. Quality announces itself, just like its opposite." A few nervous titters scattered through the restaurant. "Interesting perspective," Margaret said. Something in her posture had changed, from exhaustion to alertness. Richard moved closer. "Look, I'm doing you a favor. Places like this eat little strays like you alive." "Mr. Harrington," Margaret interrupted, her voice carrying quiet authority. "Is public humiliation always your opening move? Or am I receiving special treatment tonight?" The restaurant fell silent. Richard's smile faltered. She knew his name. "I make it my business to know the regulars," she said simply, the steel in her voice belying her travel-worn appearance. "Homework or not, you still look like you wandered in from the bus station." Margaret set down her glass with deliberate precision. "Mock me again," she said, voice barely above a whisper. Those 3 words hung in the air. Richard laughed. "Or what exactly?" "Antonio," Margaret called, her voice commanding the entire room. Antonio's head snapped up, recognition flooding his face. He moved through his restaurant with purpose. "Margaret, what is happening here? This gentleman was explaining your restaurant standards. Apparently, I don't meet them." Antonio's expression transformed to controlled fury. "You were speaking of standards to Margaret Walker?" "Just a bit of harmless. There is nothing harmless about disrespect in my establishment, especially not to the woman who helped my children through college, who taught my Sophia to play piano, who has sat at my family's Thanksgiving table for 15 years. Do you have any idea who Margaret Walker is? When my wife opened her art gallery, not one bank would give her a loan. It was Margaret who believed in her dream. Margaret who stood godmother to both my children. The woman you mock built half the schools in her hometown. She has done more good than you will accomplish in 10 lifetimes." Antonio gestured to security. Mr. Harrington is no longer welcome at the Sterling Room. Through the kitchen, please. He doesn't deserve our front door. As Richard was escorted away, stunned diners watched. Antonio turned to Margaret, taking her hands. Forgive me. Had I known you were arriving tonight, I would have greeted you properly. I came straight from the airport. Didn't want to miss Sophia's recital tomorrow. The restaurant burst into spontaneous applause. 3 days later, Richard stared at his phone in disbelief. The post had gone viral. His social media hemorrhaged followers. Dinner invitations disappeared. The empire built on others' fear was collapsing. Meanwhile, across town, laughter filled Margaret's backyard. Children chased each other while adults gathered around picnic tables. Margaret stood beside Antonio at the grill, both holding beers. You should have seen his face. Antonio chuckled. Margaret smiled, watching the children play. Some lessons need to be learned publicly. The powerful rarely listen otherwise. Singapore went well. Margaret nodded. 5 million people will have clean water by next year. Worth every minute of that flight. As twilight settled, no one mentioned Richard or the incident. Here, among family and true friends, titles meant nothing. What mattered was genuine connection, a richness Richard would never understand.